Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. I'd like to welcome you to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the shadow of the Great Blue Hills in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very delighted and absolutely honored that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating guests who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, CastBox, Audible, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two wonderful guests for you today. First up, our friend Lydia Lukidis. She'll be joining us to celebrate Up, Up High, the secret poetry of Earth's atmosphere. Later in the show, Ronda Wojcicki will be joining us to celebrate When the World Slowed Down. Are you looking for the perfect gift for a young reader? Woofy and the Dinosaur Dig Adventure, the second book in the Woofy series, is an exciting choice that fosters creativity, friendship, and teamwork. Join Woofy, a small gray stuffed dog, on his thrilling quest to help his friends excavate a T-Rex in the mountains. Young readers will enjoy his humorous adventures and admire his skills as a pup paleontologist, all set in a beautifully illustrated lyrical story. Authored by Helen Rogenson, retired award-winning teacher honored with the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. This book encourages lifelong learning while supporting charities for animal rescues and children in need. Don't miss out. Visit us at unpackyourownhappy.com and connect with us on Instagram at unpackyourownhappy. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, The Zoodles Strike Back, written by Stephen Joseph and illustrated by Andy Case. In this third installment of the Snoodles series, the Zoodles are determined to have their revenge. With the help of a grimy millionaire who's fallen on hard times, they intend to poison the Earth's water supply and turn everyone into willy-nillys and dilly-dallies. Can Brianna and Ricky save the Earth again? Will the outcast kids on the other side of the track rise to the challenge and help save the world? You can find out with Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, The Zoodles Strike Back. One of the wonderful things about being the host of Reading with Your Kids is that I have developed friendships with so many wonderful authors over the years, and our guest today certainly falls into that category. Joining us from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new book. It's called Up, Up High, The Secret Poetry of Earth's Atmosphere. Please welcome back to the show, Lydia Lukidis. Lydia, how are you?
I am great, and I'm so happy to be here and so grateful that, you gave me a chance many years ago when no one knew who I was, and I'm just so grateful for that. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Yes, Lydia was one of, not the first guest, but one of the first guests our first year back in 2017 when I had to work really hard to bring guests on the show. It's not an issue that we have anymore, but it certainly... It's a pleasure to kind of keep in touch with those people who were there when we started out and we were a baby podcast, and so great to see your career really take off. This is book number 55, 56.
I kind of lost track. I think I'm between 50 and 60. A lot of those, of course, are work for hire books, and then some of them are trade. But yeah, it's ramping up there.
Wow. I remember the days when I was between 50 and 60.
Well, that's where I'm headed.
So tell us about Up, Up High.
Well, this is a really fun one. It was actually my agent, Miranda Paul, who said to me, Well, Deep Down had such a big success where I was basically diving into the deepest ocean in the world, the Mariana Trench, and kind of putting the spotlight on the amazing organisms that live down there. Why not go in the opposite direction up into the universe? And so when she first said that, I right away knew, there's an idea there. It took a while for this to come to fruition, though, because as you know, sometimes you'll do some research, but then things aren't gelling. And so I put it aside numerous times until one day it just completely gelled. And I got really into it, and I just every day would work on this particular book. And so this is essentially going up high. When you look up in the sky, it almost looks like there's nothing there, right? To a child. It's, okay, there's clouds and maybe I'll see an airplane once in a while, but what the heck is going on up there? Well, actually, there's a lot going on up there that we can't see, obviously, with our eyes because we've got 5 layers of the atmosphere. And I have to admit that I learned a lot about what is up there. Some things like electrical phenomena called sprites that I had never heard of that were actually discovered in 1989 that are phenomenal. The Aurora Borealis, what is that? How is that a scientific phenomenon? So I learned a lot of things, but the biggest takeaway that I want kids to understand is that, number one, this atmosphere gives them life. Literally, if Earth did not have an atmosphere, as many of our planets in our solar system do not, we wouldn't be here. And the second thing is that it protects us. So here we are living our daily lives. It's invisible. We don't see it, but it plays a huge role in our lives.
Yeah. Now, when we talked about deep down, you talked about all the creatures and organisms that live deep down. Is there anything living up? I know birds, but is there any organisms that are floating around in our atmosphere that we might not be aware of?
Well, I have 2 answers to that. So first of all, I did not know this, but there's a certain type of vulture, one species, that can fly as high or if not higher than a plane. So you could conceivably be in the plane one day and then all of a sudden you see a vulture go by. So I did not know how high they could travel. The second thing I discovered, which really could not fit in the book because it is a picture book, so there's limited space, was that there are little bacteria and microorganisms up there that we don't see. But this is kind of a new science. So I just didn't have room in the book. So I focused on, elements that most of which children have heard of, but a lot of which they have not heard of. So it's kind of surprising.
Yeah. I remember long ago when I was a kid, so almost 100 years ago, there was a meteorologist here in Boston, legendary meteorologist, and he started a movement to get people just to look up and be aware of the sky and to take note of the clouds and everything. Because, like you said, we just take it for granted. It's up there and we don't think about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And in my research, I learned that the troposphere, which of course is the first layer, the layer that we are in, that's where all the weather happens. There is some weather above, but most of it happens there. But it's the most violent. Well, I say violent, but it's intense. Like think of a thunderstorm or lightning or things of that nature. And things can move really quickly. Weather is actually a most fascinating thing. And I bet when framed correctly, kids are interested. They want to know about cyclones. They want to know about tornadoes, all those extreme things. Well, that's a part of our weather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I remember one of my most fun classes in college, not that I was into science at all, but I took an earth science class. And we were predicting the weather.
Oh, wow.
Making all that kind of stuff. And that was really a lot of fun.
It really is. And I think it's fascinating being someone who's in that field. I have so much curiosity. I would have done 50 other jobs had I not been an author. But it's a fascinating thing. And it's something that we're so intimately connected to because it affects us, right? Mm-hmm. And so but that's only a tiny part of what's up there because the troposphere is really not that wide. When we go up further, then that's when things begin to expand. And that's when kind of the mystery unfolds because we don't know everything about what's up there, by the way. Think about it. We just learned about sprites in 1989. What else is up there that we don't know about?
Right.
I don't know.
So what is a sprite?
Well, it's really funny because it was very difficult to research. There's not that much information out there. There's several electrical phenomena that exist up there, like they're called orbs. I know these names sound kind of fanciful, but they are scientific phenomena and it's something that happens right after a storm. I can't get into the physics of it. It's pretty complicated, but it's caused with the electrons moving and such. And it only comes for literally a split second. These beautiful lights that are usually red, that look actually like jellyfish, are literally there for a split second and then they disappear. So that's why we never saw them, because, it comes and goes so quickly. And why would we be seeing up there? It's so far. But then one day we discovered it, and now we're discovering even more. So it's really interesting because we know a lot about the layers near us. We know a lot about the exosphere, but then the mesosphere kind of is this uncharted territory because it's too high for planes, too low for space shuttles. So we kind of don't really know what's going on up there.
Wow. This really is fascinating. You mentioned the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis. Well, I had the chance one time to see them while I was skiing. It was in Vermont, so I didn't get all the colors, but I saw the shimmering and the white lights. And what's going on with that?
Well, again, it's the sun is always emitting sun radiation and all these electrons, and so they come to the Earth. But because we've obviously got a magnetic field, they're being repelled, so they don't come and bombard the Earth. However, our our electromagnetic shield is a lot weaker at the two poles, and so they kind of converge there. And so all of these electrons are essentially, having a reaction with the different gases, and the different gases produce the different colors. So it boggles my mind because it's so magical, but it's scientific at its root. So a lot of what we consider magic, it's beautiful, it's mesmerizing, it actually has a scientific explanation. So the two go hand in hand.
Yeah. There's an expression, I'm going to butcher it, but there's basically an expression that our science is somebody else's magic.
Yeah, I kind of love that because I studied art and science and have learned that the two worlds are not mutually exclusive. They are the same. Science is magic. And that's why I write a lot about science for STEM topics for kids, because I find it fascinating. And when I spend a lot of time in a classroom, believe me, they find it fascinating, but you have to frame it in the right way. It can't be like this boring textbooky, teaching down to a student. The way you engage a child is by asking questions, having a dialogue, showing pictures, videos. They love videos. So I'm so excited to go in with pictures of a sprite and saying, who here knows what this is? Or putting on a video of the Aurora Borealis. Who can explain this? So I'm going to have a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah. And so we come from two different countries, but very wonderful neighbors and very similar in a lot of our cultures. But it does seem that at some point people in education decided we're going to make everything as boring and uninteresting as possible. History, just make kids memorize dates. Science, just give them facts and don't challenge their imagination. Don't get them to, really fall into these subjects. I don't understand. And I don't think there was a meeting and they actually said those things, but it seems that way.
Yeah, it just kind of turned out that way. I mean, there's one type of learning, academic learning, that's more rote, memorizing facts, and you're not actually learning. And
Right.
then experiential learning. And a lot of schools do apply both to their curriculum. So you'll have classes where you're actually learning through, and like in science class where my daughter's actually doing experiments, so she's learning by experience, which is amazing. But when she studies for tests, I always say to her, don't just memorize the facts. Can you explain what's going on? For example, she just had a test on the American Revolution. I was quizzing her and she answered all the questions. And then when I said to her, what is the American Revolution? She couldn't answer. So you see how disjointed that is, the way we learn sometimes. We need to give kids the bigger picture. This is what it is. Now we can go into the facts. Okay, fine, you have to memorize things. I'm not convinced of how useful that is as a skill. Some kids just don't memorize well. But to just understand what was the American Revolution, what caused it. That's just an example. And so when I give workshops, I try to use examples that pertain and connect to their lives. So they feel like they're connected to the material, or it's stuff that they're interested in. So they don't feel like they're learning. Because believe me, every time I bring out the papers and the kids, inevitably always groan, oh, there's a learning component to this workshop. And now I don't do that. I just have my PowerPoint presentation, but I kind of trick them because I put all the curriculum that was in the paper into the PowerPoint. So they're still learning, but it's in a different way. It's just through dialogue.
Yeah. So you are, in essence, a teacher. You teach through your books. You teach through doing school visits and classes. Do you have to kind of change the way you're thinking when you sit down to write a book as opposed to going into a classroom doing a presentation, or is it all just that comes naturally to you?
I think it comes naturally to me, and I say that, but with a caveat. Oh boy, writing books is very difficult. Like I'm writing 4 different books at the same time now, and I'm very stuck in 3 of them. And so there's been no headway. So I say it comes naturally, but it's also a journey. And sometimes it takes many years. Like my last book took 10 years to publish. So it comes when it comes. But the act of being, just me and my curiosity, it's an organic thing. I am that way. And so when I go into a classroom, kids can feel my passion, my curiosity, because I try to, make that a little bit like a motivation for them as well to ask questions about the world and to go read books, not just my books, but books in general.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned earlier that a lot of the 50 to 60 books that you've written were works for hire or trade. Can you talk a little bit about because there may be some people out there that don't understand the difference and are curious about that.
Yeah, I think that if you're not in the kidlit industry, you won't know the difference. And even me, I was in the kidlit industry for many years, and I still couldn't understand what's the difference. So an educational book is for that specific industry that's marketed for schools and libraries. So you're paid usually a flat fee. You're not given royalties. They'll give you a certain topic. You write on that topic. There's certain writing parameters. There might be parameters with the language and, fluency and all that kind of thing. So it is a much more traditional and academic way to write. And so I had to train myself to get out of that mindset because I had gotten so used to it that when I tried to write a book that was trade, which is more universal, it's a book that you could go to Walmart and see on the shelf. It's concepts that can, kind of enlighten children everywhere, not just in schools and libraries. It was very difficult to make that leap. And I've had this conversation with a lot of other authors who have done a lot of work for hire. Sometimes it does as a disservice because we've learned so much to write in that specific way that I had to do a lot of breaking down of what I've learned in order to make that leap. And I'm still learning. But it's not the easiest leap, but I managed to do it with deep down. I think because I just out of luck, sheer luck, I fell on a topic that kids already love, which was the deep sea. Like as soon as I walk in the class and I show them the book, I get a reaction. And believe me, that's not always the case with my books. Like it's varying reactions depending on how popular that topic is. But I'm not going to write about something just because it's popular, because I need to love the topic. So this time it just kind of was magic and they loved it. So let's hope that happens with the atmosphere.
Well, as you said, it is something that protects us, that gives us life. And unlike the ocean, we're not in it every day like we are in the atmosphere.
Yeah, that's it. It is kind of like a sea of gases. When I was first writing the book, I said to myself, it is kind of like another ocean, except it's a sea of gas that englobes the planet instead of, water. So It's kind of cool in that way. At first it might seem like, okay, the Earth's atmosphere, that's kind of boring. But believe me, it's very exciting with all the facts that I've learned. And there's still much more that I don't know about. I'm definitely by no means an expert, but I managed to find the most interesting tidbits and put them in the book. And it actually works. So I'm happy about that because it doesn't always work. Sometimes we'll pick a topic, we'll write a book, and it's like, it's not working or there's not enough kid appeal. That's the important thing about trade books is that what I've learned is that the kid appeal is essential.
Yeah. One of the things that we talked about, I think we talked about in Deep Down, is that that's a book that can help kids develop an appreciation and love of the ocean and a desire to take better care of it. We've hosted kids from China in our home. And one of the things when I ask them, what are you going to miss most about living here in Boston? Oftentimes I'll hear the fresh air.
Oh, wow.
Are you hoping that up high might motivate kids, inspire kids to have a deeper appreciation for our air, especially for our clean air, and want to work hard to keep it clean?
Oh, yeah, especially in light of what's unfolding in our world and has been unfolding for the last few decades, pollution and so forth, global warming, all of these things are really important. And that's always kind of the driving force behind the book. But I don't put it out front. I talk about it usually in the back matter. That's what I did with Deep, Deep Down. And I'm going to be talking about the importance of clean air and the importance of understanding what your actions can have like a ripple effect, right? So what you do in, things that maybe pollute the earth, well, that's going to affect this, and that. It's like a domino effect. So I want kids to understand, yeah, you're just a kid, but you are a human being. This is an amazing gift that you've been given. So make sure you're conscious of how you're treating each other and how you're treating the planet.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important that we empower kids to understand that they may be little people, but their actions can make a huge difference in the world.
Yeah, and kids are really intelligent. And I learned that many years ago when I started workshops when I was a puppeteer, and I would give workshops, and I was always astounded because at that time I didn't have kids, and I was always astounded by how intelligent they are and the quality of the questions they'll ask and the things they think about in their minds. And now I'm pretty much used to it, but every time I go into a workshop, sometimes I end up learning things too. Yeah. Or just, thinking about something I never thought of. Or if they ask me a question that I can't answer, that really bothers me. So I'll always go home and do the research, and then I'll email the teacher with the answer because I like to answer all questions.
It is fun taking questions from kids during school presentations. Do you remember a question that some student asked you that kind of really surprised you, or that was really funny, or that just came out of left field?
I mean, it really depends on the age, because I find that I've stopped saying any questions in kindergarten and grade 1 because you won't even get a question. You're going to get a comment. I like your hair.
Yes.
And inevitably, these aren't that interesting, but the two questions that always pop up with my older students, how old are you? And how much money do you make? And then the teacher will always pop in and say, now kids, that's really rude to ask that, but I actually answer the question. Okay. So I'm honest. I mean, this is how old I am. And then I say, how old did you think I was? And some kid said, I thought you were 80. I was like, okay, I think you need to get a better sense of ages here. But you got to kind of laugh it off. And the money thing as well, I think, because there's a lot of people who are of the thought that, well, if you're an author, if you're an artist, you can't make a lot of money. And so I spell it out in a really realistic way. If you want to become a millionaire, don't become an author. This is not the way to becoming a millionaire. There are other methods. I'm not saying that you can't become a millionaire. I mean, look at Dave Pilkey, look at Jeff Kinney. They're millionaires, but that's the anomaly. So you do this because you love it, but there's ways to make money from it if you do it in the right way.
Yeah. I recently did a school show in upstate New York, and I had a sixth grader in the middle of my show. We're doing this crazy magic, and everybody is laughing. We're having a lot of fun, and this kid is just going crazy. And I'm, do you have a question? And he said, yes. Are you Mexican?
That's what he's thinking about.
I said, yeah.
He needed to know.
I know he did. And so I said, hey, instead, do you want to come up and help me with something? And he did, and we had a great time.
I think sometimes the kids just want to get involved. And so anytime I ask questions or enter into a dialogue, I see some kids that are really excited to speak, and it looks like their hands are going to just fly off because they're shaking them so hard. But it's interesting to me. They just want to be part of it. Kids don't like to be talked down to. They don't want me to stand there for 2 hours and talk about the, publishing industry. How boring is that? Right. They want to have a dialogue. They want to ask questions, answer questions, and, really have some fun while we're learning.
Yeah. I'm curious, now we've gone down, we've gone up. Is the next book going to look inward and go deep inside ourselves?
I have always wanted to write a book about that. So let's see if that, because that's what Miranda, my agent, was asking me. Okay, where are we going next? And I was thinking about that, and I've always been fascinated with the human body. I have been trying to write a book about the brain anatomy, not just anatomy, but how the brain functions. But it's just, I have now found the right structure. So that one's been on the bench for about 5 years. So this is really what kids don't know, is that we don't just pop out books. Oh, it's a picture book. It's so short. No, it takes years sometimes, often. It has never taken me shorter than a year to write a picture book, and sometimes it'll take me several years. So I'm still trying to get out this book about the brain. So let's see how that goes.
All right. Well, we want you to come back when that book comes out. And whenever books come out, we should remind everybody where they can go to find out more about Up High and find out more about all those 50 to 60 books you've written.
Yes, well, they can head on over to my website, which is lydialukidis.com. So that's LYDIALUKIDIS.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Up High, The Secret Poetry of Earth's Atmosphere. Our guest has been Lydia Lukidis. Lydia, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thank you for having me.
This episode is brought to you by Feliz Navidad. It's December of 2019, and Pittsburgh is covered in a terrible fog. Even worse, all of the reindeer get sick and they can't fly. Everyone in the North Pole is worried they'll have to cancel Christmas. But just when all hope seems lost, Santa's pet, Feliz Navidad, raises his paw to help. And while a dog is not quite a reindeer, Feliz is their last chance to save Christmas. This is a book about perseverance and grit. Feliz Navidad, the story of how Santa's dog saved Christmas. Get your copy today. Feliz Navidad by Ari and Rhea Helper. This episode is brought to you by the Logan series. 3 wonderful books written by Christine Ritchie McNamee. Logan and the Missing Masterpiece, Logan and the Lost Luggage, Logan and the Missing Jewels. Logan and the Lost Luggage is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read, and all 3 of these books feature Logan, an adorable Cocker Spaniel who travels the world with his magic bone. You and your kids are going to love traveling around the world with Logan, meeting animals from all over the world, visiting different countries, and learning how to get along with people from other countries and other cultures. It's a beautiful series of books. Our Reading with Your Kids certified great read panel loved Logan and the Last Luggage. We know you're going to love all 3 books. Check it out today. The Logan series by Christine Ritchie McNamee. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by the books by Charmaine Perry Knights. Charmaine is a TEDx speaker, award-winning facilitator, world traveler, and author. Serving military families through quality literature is her goal and her passion. Her books are absolutely amazing. They are just full of great messages. Books like I'll Find My Way, and That's Okay. I Move a Lot, and That's Okay. And It's Cool to Be Kind. Such great books that you and your kids will absolutely adore. These books deserve to be in your family library. Get them today. The books by Charmaine Perry Knights. They're available today at Amazon. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Kentucky. Our guest is here today to celebrate. Her new children's book is called When the World Slowed Down. Please welcome to the show, Ronda Wojcicki. Ronda, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Did you see how I tried to hide my mistake? I called you Wanda, and then I changed it quickly to Ronda.
It actually happens all the time to me.
I think it's the W on the last name that confused me there. Ronda, tell us all about When the World Slowed Down. What part of time are you talking about?
So When the World Slowed Down is a children's book about the time during the pandemic. And the backstory is at the time the pandemic first hit, I was a speech language pathologist. And like many speech paths, I created a lot of materials for my kids. And so I started writing this story then. And then, what happened? We went online and schools were shut down. So the actual story that I wrote was in 2020 and it got shelved. And our personal story during the pandemic, my husband's job reloaded us from New Jersey to Kentucky. So once I got settled here, I actually started as a mentor in the public schools. And I found that I was answering the same questions for the children over and over, you know, the concerns they were having and the different topics they wanted to talk about that they were struggling with during the pandemic. And so I actually went back and pulled the story out that I wrote, and shortly after became convinced that I need to turn this into my second children's book. I think I need to publish this. So that's kind of how it evolved.
Well, I've mentioned this on the show before. I was greatly helped by a speech therapist when I was kindergarten in first grade. I had a very challenging stutter that rears its ugly occasionally, especially when I get tired or when I'm challenged with a paragraph with many F's and S's in it. They did, and my speech therapist, Mr. Wallanuis, did incredible work with me.
I love hearing that. I love hearing when kids have had, well, now adults, but when they were kids have had really positive experiences in speech. That's great to hear.
Yeah. And, you know, the interesting thing, Rhonda, is that Mr. Wallanuis, he had a worse stutter than I did.
Yeah, that actually doesn't surprise me, which is probably what drove him to study it and eventually help others.
Do we have any idea, just because I'm curious, do we have any idea why kids stutter?
So it is a difference in the brain, and it is still in 2024 not fully understood. But to my knowledge, research is getting closer all the time.
Uh-huh. Now, what they used to say, one of the things they said to me was, in addition to stuttering and repeating letters or being stuck, that I would, my brain was running faster than my mouth, which surprises a lot of people that might be possible. And that I would have said the sentence in my brain before it came out of my mouth, but as far as I was concerned, I was already finished.
Right, and there's a disconnect with it coming out, yeah.
Fascinating. So what kind of, we've heard that kids with speech challenges were really affected during the pandemic, but also during the time when schools reopened and everybody had to wear masks. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, well, first when we went online, that was a problem. I was actually working with a group of students in New Jersey on social skills, and I'm trying to Zoom with them. So you can imagine this. They're all in their individual homes. I've got the, 6 boxes across the screen. And initially Zoom was really choppy. And remember, we would interrupt each other. The person wasn't even actually interrupting. There was just a bit of a lag sometimes. And so here I am working on social skills, and two of the kids in this particular group I'm thinking of are working on not interrupting others. So you can imagine what a train wreck it was, and just all the different social skills with Zoom. So a lot of my sessions ended up kind of diverting into almost more of like a check-in. How are we holding up at home kind of session? They went south pretty quickly. But you're right. Then when we went back in person, especially, all the younger kids, because kids look at, this other speaker's face for cues. They look at their eyes, their facial expressions. So all of that was hidden with the masks. And especially in speech therapy, kids who are working on articulation, any specific sounds, it's very, very challenging to teach sound production using all of your articulators that you can no longer see and are covered up. So yeah, that was another train wreck.
Yeah.
I'm glad that that's past us and everybody's back in person and we can see each other's faces.
Boy, oh boy. So, and you're speaking about Zoom being choppy. I remember the first time I tried to present my educational magic show via Zoom. And I was here in my studio and had everything set up and I was all set to go. And the school came on and there are 30, 40 little boxes and 18 pages of 30 or 40 little boxes. And there was this one trick that always was just got a phenomenal response. Every time this happened, there's this one moment where kids saw something. This bag was empty, and then suddenly you could see, boom, there was something in the bag, and it just appeared. And, every time I did it, there was always that, as soon as that thing appeared, always this huge reaction. And I do it in front of the screen, and nothing.
Right.
No reaction at all. And I'm sitting there. It was the longest 2 seconds in my life. I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? What in the world? And then from out of nowhere, everybody went,
oh, that's great. Because that would have been hard to recover from if it just stayed silent.
Exactly. Yeah. It was just that 2 second delay. So in the story of when the world slowed down, what are we just going to be reliving the nightmare of the pandemic, or is there a rainbow to the story?
So I promise it is a positive story. And that was my biggest fear when I was publishing this book, is that I thought, I'm so over the pandemic, the word COVID, the whole thing. I don't even want to hear about it. And so I was hoping that adults wouldn't have that same reaction, like, oh, what is that? No, thank you. But I will say it has been so well received by all the teachers who are hearing it when I'm doing school visits, and, the other adults, but especially the kids. And so, no, it is not a nightmare book. It is basically the story of what happened during that time. And what I started to realize when I started doing school visits is that kids who are currently in first grade and younger right now, a lot of them actually have no idea the pandemic even happened, if you can believe that, because they were either in preschool or, babies when everything happened, and they don't know any different. They were at home with parents, and then, when they got older, they went to school. So for them, it's actually like a history lesson about the most important thing, or maybe not most important, but the biggest thing historically that has happened in their young lifetimes. Now for the older kids, really it's not only, of course it covers things, not all of them know about all the different aspects, and that's a nice part of it. I tried to hit, all the different things that were going on, but also the older kids, it gives them a chance to kind of process what they went through and then also talk about it. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the book, I have discussion questions, a set for the younger ones and for the older ones. And then I also put, because I'm a speech pathologist and this is what we do, I put extension activities so that teachers can, do these various, I want to say there's 8 for each age group, maybe there's 10, but can do these activities to kind of take it to the next level, experiential learning, and take the concepts a little bit further.
Yeah. I think my reaction, my playful, hopefully you understood I was being playful, take on it is, I think it's natural for adults. It was a horrible time. Let's put it behind us. And we really don't need to talk about it anymore. We especially don't need our politicians to talk about it anymore. But, for a guy like me, 100 years old almost, and it's 2 years out of all the many years that I've already lived. However, if you're talking about someone who is in the first grade when the pandemic hit, and it was, 6, 7 years old, and now you're talking about 2 years out of that kid's life, which is more than 20% of their life, I think we're going to have, to be talking about this, especially with those kids, for a long time.
Sure. And when I do the school readings, one thing I talk about with the kids is that I like to always talk about reading and writing, because I'm, right there with you, that those are so important from the very beginning with kids. And I speak to them about, if you want to write a book about a certain topic, don't say, oh, I see there's one right there. It's already been done, because there's tons of books on every topic, but no one has the has it framed or has the exact story that's in your head about that topic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I found with this book when I looked to see, because I looked to see if there was one just to use it at first when I was mentoring. And I found books about viruses, about washing your hands. There were some books about COVID, but some of them were about essential workers, just different aspects. And so the story in my heart that I wanted to share with these kids was that even in negative situations, we can always find a silver lining. We can always look to see what have we learned from this that we can take forward with us. And another thing I've been talking about with the kids lately, because I've seen such a need for this, is resiliency in our young kids. And so I talk to them about bad things happen. That's life. Bad things are going to happen. You can't avoid that. But what did we learn and how can we be stronger because we went through that situation? And so, spoiler alert, the end of my book, the real message is, what did we learn? We learned that when we slowed down and got our priorities in order and focused on what really mattered, that's when we gained something positive from this situation. And the thing that really mattered the most in the end was each other and our relationships with each other. And that's another thing kids really need to learn about is building relationships.
I love that, especially in a time where it seems like so many of the adults in kids' lives aren't connecting or are allowing what should be really inconsequential things or not as important things to separate us from each other and to go off in corners and not talk to people. I think it's so important to remind kids that we are all part of one beautiful human family, and those relationships are so important.
Yeah, I agree. And so that's why the subtitle of the book is How We Were Reminded That We Are All Connected. Because, you remember right before the pandemic hit, we were all spinning our wheels so fast. I think a lot of adults and children had kind of lost their focus in that regard.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's interesting you're talking about being connected. I'm right now listening to an audiobook written by one of my favorite authors, Father Greg Boyle, who's the founder of Homeboy Industries, the largest gang intervention program in the world. And the name of his new book is Cherished Belonging. And the whole message of his book is that we are all connected and we're only healthy when we realize that we're all connected.
I need to send him a book.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. He's out in LA. We'll talk about that at the end of this conversation. One of the things that we talk about here on the podcast, I don't know if we mentioned it lately, but one of the reasons why we encourage families to read with their kids every day is that if a kid is read to every day for 20 minutes a day, 15, 20 minutes a day, by the time that kid reaches kindergarten, first grade, they will have heard over 800,000 to 1 million more words than their peers who weren't read to. Why, from a speech therapist point of view, why is that so important, and why does it give kids such a leg up?
Well, I think as a mom, I just loved reading with my kids. It's my favorite memory of raising my boys. They're now 18 and 21, and I feel like they're very good examples because one is now finishing up his engineering degree and the other studying to be a physical therapist. They're both bright. They both have good vocabularies. It all worked out. But as a speech path, I would say the vocabulary building, obviously exposing them to more words, builds their what we call lexicon. Mm-hmm. Of course, you're exposing them also just to different topics that would never normally come up in everyday conversation, so you're just broadening their horizons. Mm-hmm. You're also exposing them, especially when they're younger, just to different concepts that are often learned through reading. I mean, I could go on and on. I feel like you do. Like, I just think there's just so many benefits to it. And then also the bonding time, and the shared time, even with peers when they read in groups at school, and then them reading out loud, you know, the presentation skills, the confidence building. And, you know, you learn to read for the first few grades, and then is it third or fourth grade from then on, you read to learn. So what an advantage kids who are in second grade, who are really strong readers, they're already off reading, learning about everything, well, you know, ahead of their time. So I don't think we can emphasize it enough to parents that reading is so important.
You know, I'm so happy that you mentioned that whole concept of you learn to read from kindergarten to second grade, and then third grade, you're reading to learn. Because I don't think anybody tells parents that.
Well, I always told parents that. Just
Okay.
So you know.
Well, that's good, because I don't remember. I had very good relationships with my kids' teachers, and my beautiful wife was a teacher for 34 years, but I don't remember anybody specifically saying, hey, it's really important that these kids are reading independently by the time they're finished second grade, because we're not going to be teaching them that anymore. They're going to have to be independent readers so they can be independently learning.
Right. Yeah. I learned that in graduate school many, many years ago, and I shared that with parents throughout my whole career.
Yeah. And I'm like you, and I launched Reading with Your Kids back in 2017 because at that time, I wanted to do a podcast that was addressing parents and parenting, and I knew that the relationship I have with my now 28 and 31-year-old kids was built on a foundation of reading, and our relationships are great. And that was a message that I wanted to get out to parents. It's read, bond, get closer to your kids. It's wonderful for them. It's amazing for you. And it's just, it's like that foundation that is going to build real strong relationships. And then when I started doing the podcast and we got smart people like you on the show, and I found out there's so many other benefits, I'm like, I did a good thing by accident.
Yeah, no, you did. And I would add to that, it's fairly common that parents are reading to very young children, but I always thought they stopped too soon. Don't stop. So what I did, for example, with my kids was when they got to maybe fifth grade, or when the older one was in fifth grade and the younger one was then in second grade, we started the Harry Potter series. So I would alternate chapters with my older son, and he would read to me and his younger brother. And then we got through the whole Harry Potter series. Then we started the Chronicles of Narnia. And by that time, my youngest was able to start reading and joining in the whole thing. So then he would read a chapter, I would read a chapter, the other one would read a chapter. So, I think it's really important to have them read to you as well. And I don't think that's as common.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's even a lot of evidence that when we're reading or co-reading with our teenagers, there's a lot of benefit to that.
Yeah. I will say I probably succumbed to sports eventually because, scheduling. But we've had different activities where, they were doing something with youth group, and then, we were reading the Bible as a family. And so, but not as regularly, we didn't have that structure that we did up through middle school.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the things reading with my daughter led to was cooking with my daughter and then watching TV. We had appointment TV that we would come together, and it was just like dialogic reading. It was like we'd be watching the show and we'd be having conversations every time there was a commercial. And what do you think about that? And what a dope, and it was just a great way to continue to build that bond and open up lines of communication. And sometimes the conversations, it wouldn't even be about what we were watching on TV. It would lead to conversations that were things that were happening in her life. And just so many benefits. Sure.
And it helps build critical thinkers.
Yeah.
Which sometimes I regret when my boys want to argue a point with me. I think, maybe I did too good a job.
Yes, amen. I sometimes agree. It's It is a double-edged sword. Rhonda, I just had, and I've asked this of other speech therapists who became writers and came on the show, and they didn't really know, but I'll just give it a chance. I recently had Christian recording artist Jason Gray on the show, and he wrote a beautiful book called Sparrows that was based on a song called Sparrows, and he's a beautiful storyteller through song, but he has a very pronounced stutter. There's no hint of that when he is singing, but when he's speaking and having conversations, and sometimes the stutter is more challenging than other times. Any idea why someone like, and Jason isn't the only person who does this, that someone like Jason could have such a difficult time speaking, but then when you put music behind it, it's clear as a bell?
Yeah, that's actually very common. And I can't tell you why, but I do know that for the majority of people, at least that I've worked with who have stuttered, they could sing fluently. And another interesting thing is they could speak in a foreign accent fluently if they took on an accent. And then other things make it much, much worse. For example, speaking on the telephone. Mm-hmm. That's something that brings out the stutter more so. But certainly it wasn't my specialty. So, I have kept up with it in terms of taking, classes over the years. And the most recent class, like a CEU class that I took, was exciting because it really sounds like we're getting closer with brain studies to understanding it more.
Wow. I had no idea that someone with a stutter could speak in an accent and speak clearly.
Yeah, not everyone, but some people can do that, just like singing.
Boy, I tell you, if I still had my stutter, I'd be talking with my Italian accent all the time. Rhonda, where can we go to find out more about When the World Slowed Down and find out more about you?
So my Instagram is Speech Place Pub, all one word. You can read about the book on Amazon. It's for sale on Amazon as well as okiebees.com. And then I have a Facebook author page, which is Ronda Wojcicki. Hopefully you have it written somewhere or no one's ever going to find it. And then after my name, it's pediatric speech language pathologist, a little ampersand, and children's author.
We've had a really, really fun and fascinating time speaking to the author of When the World Slowed Down. Our guest has been Ronda Wojcicki. Rhonda, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and we hope you'll join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In fact, we hope you've enjoyed this episode so much that you're inspired to leave us a review on whatever platform you find the show. And if you are listening on the WREB AM FM 24/7 radio network, 16 great AM and FM radio stations all across the United States, please let your local station manager know that you love reading with your kids. We'd also love for you to connect with us on social media for two reasons. Facebook.com/Reading with Your Kids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, and at Jedly Magic on X or Twitter, whatever you call it these days. And here's why you want to connect with me on social media. Because we love connecting with our listeners on social media. We love to hear who you would like to hear on a future episode of the show, reactions to the episodes. We love that. We'd also love for you to connect with us on social media because it would make it so much easier for you to then share links to the podcast with your followers. It's a great way to help us build up our army with the mission of helping all families grow closer through reading. We'd also love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. That's another great way that you can let us know who you'd like to hear on a future episode of the show. Just click the contact button up at the top of the page and let us know. And, of course, you can find us on YouTube, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And if you are an author, you absolutely want to go to readingwithyourkids.com and click the author's click here button. You find it up at the top of the page. That way you can find out how you can be a guest. Being a guest is fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of kidlit fans all around the world about your fantastic children's book. I want to thank the folks who helped make this episode so wonderful. We want to start by thanking our guest, Lydia Lukidis. Be sure to check out Up High, The Secret Poetry of Earth's Atmosphere. And also, please be sure to check out Ronda Wojcicki. Her book is When the World Slowed Down. I want to thank my team, Chris Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Rayling Tang. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.